The gun was still warm in Vincent Steele's hand. He stood in the shadowed corner of the basement, watching blood drip from his knuckles onto the concrete floor. The man slumped against the wall across from him wasn't dead, not yet, but he would be soon enough. That's how things worked in this world. Loose ends got tied up. Threats got eliminated. Mercy was a luxury reserved for people who had the luxury of choice. Vincent didn't have that luxury anymore. The basement smelled like rust and fear, the kind of fear that comes right before the end. He'd grown so accustomed to that smell that he barely noticed it anymore. What he did notice, what he couldn't stop noticing, was how his hands were shaking. Not from what he'd just done. From what he'd seen 2 hours ago. A waitress. The thought came to him unbidden, the way the best torture always does. Not the physical kind. The kind that eats at you from the inside out, reminding you that you're still human, even when you've done everything in your power to kill that part of yourself. Vincent turned away from the dying man, climbing the metal stairs out of the basement. His lieutenant, a scarred brute named Holloway, stood at the top, expressionless as always. "Boss, we've got a problem uptown," he said, not even glancing at Vincent's bloody hands. "The Rossi crew is making moves on our territory again." Vincent barely heard him. His mind was already 3 miles away, at Malone's diner on 5th and Morrison, where a waitress with tired eyes and an honest smile had served him coffee this morning while he'd sat in a booth, supposedly reviewing shipment manifests on his laptop. She'd refilled his cup without asking. She'd asked how his day was going. And when he'd looked up at her, really looked at her, he'd felt something crack open inside his chest that he'd spent 20 years cementing shut. Vincent. Holloway was staring at him now, concern flickering across his scarred features. "You good?" "I'm fine," Vincent lied. "What did you say about Rossi?" But he wasn't fine. He knew he wasn't fine the moment he'd seen her name tag, Emma. Such a simple word. Such a dangerous word. Across the city, in a penthouse that made Vincent's own look modest, Angelo Rossi was having nearly the same thought. "You're distracted," his consigliere, a sharp-eyed man named Delacroix, observed from the leather chair across from him. They were reviewing numbers, protection money, gambling operations, the usual streams of blood money that kept the Rossi empire flowing. Angelo should have been focused. He should have been planning his next move against the Steele organization. Instead, he was thinking about a waitress. Not just any waitress. The waitress. Emma. He'd walked into Malone's diner 3 days ago on a whim, looking for a quiet place to take a phone call away from his organization. The diner was exactly what he needed, anonymous, unremarkable, the kind of place where nobody would think to look for the second most powerful crime boss in the city. And then she'd walked up to his table. Angelo had seen a lot of things in his 42 years. He'd seen men break. He'd seen women scheme. He'd seen loyalty crumble and betrayal flourish. But he'd never seen anything quite like the way Emma had moved through that diner with such genuine kindness, treating every customer, from the homeless man in the corner to the businessman on his phone, with the same quiet respect. It was obscene. In his world, kindness was a weakness. Respect was something you took, not gave. And yet, there she was, proving every rule he'd ever lived by was a lie. Angelo. Delacroix was standing now, watching him with something like alarm. "Your phone's been ringing for 2 minutes." Angelo blinked. He picked up the phone. It was one of his captains, reporting that Steele's crew had hit one of their operations downtown. The message was clear: the war was escalating. Under normal circumstances, this would have energized him. Under normal circumstances, he would have already been planning retaliation, coordinating with his men, executing a strategy that would cripple his rival's operation. But under normal circumstances, he hadn't spent the last 60 hours thinking about a waitress named Emma with sad eyes and a smile that suggested she'd seen the worst of the world and refused to become it. "Get me everything," Angelo said quietly into the phone. "Every detail. I want to know where they moved next." He was going to end this. He was going to end Vincent Steele. And once that was done, he was going to walk into Malone's diner and ask that waitress out for a drink. It was madness. It was the kind of thinking that got men killed in his world. But when he closed his eyes, he could still see her face. The slight sadness lingering in her expression. The weariness that no amount of good humor could quite mask. And he thought, maybe she deserves someone who can actually protect her. Maybe she deserves a better version of me. Of course, There was no better version of Angelo Rossi. There was only the version that existed, the version that had built an empire through violence and fear. But for the first time in 20 years, he wanted to try. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. Before we dive deeper into this insane story, I've got to ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. I love hearing from you guys all over the world. And real quick, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel if you're vibing with this story. Seriously, it helps me so much, and trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. This story gets absolutely wild. Are you doing okay tonight? I hope you're somewhere comfortable, because what's about to unfold between these two rival mafia bosses and the one woman they're both dangerously obsessed with, it's going to shake you to your core. Emma Thornton didn't know what she did to earn the attention of the two most dangerous men in the city. She was 28 years old, worked double shifts at Malone's diner to pay rent on a studio apartment that smelled like old carpet, and spent her evenings reading library books on her worn-out couch. Her life was small. It was safe. It was exactly what she'd built after the last time she'd let someone into her world and let them destroy it from the inside out. That had been 5 years ago. His name was James, and he'd promised her the world while systematically isolating her from everyone who loved her. By the time she'd found the strength to leave, she'd been a shadow of herself, hollow-eyed, traumatized, broken in ways that no amount of time seemed to fully heal. So Emma had done what survivors do. She'd rebuilt. Carefully. Cautiously. She'd taken a job at the diner because it was visible, populated, safe. She'd surrounded herself with people, the regular customers, her manager Tony, the kitchen staff, because isolation was her fear now. She'd promised herself she would never, ever let another man close enough to hurt her. And then Vincent Steele had walked in on a Tuesday morning, ordered black coffee, and smiled at her in a way that made her forget why she'd made that promise in the first place. He came back on Wednesday. And Thursday. And Friday. By the following week, Emma realized she was timing her shifts around the possibility of seeing him. She'd never been more ashamed of herself. He was clearly a man of power, the way he commanded attention without trying, the way his expensive suit sat perfectly on his broad shoulders, the way his dark eyes seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls. In her experience, men like that only brought pain. And yet, when she saw his black SUV pulling up outside the diner, her heart did that stupid fluttering thing that she'd thought she'd trained herself out of. Stay professional, she reminded herself. Just pour the coffee and move on. But Vincent had other ideas. Emma, he said one morning, his voice low and intentional, the way he always said her name like it was a word worth savoring. There's a restaurant 2 blocks from here. The one with the Italian place next to it. Do you know it? She did know it. It was expensive. Exclusive. The kind of place where people made reservations months in advance. I know it, she said, her voice steadier than her hands. Have dinner with me tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. It wasn't a question. But there was something in his expression that made her feel like he was genuinely asking, genuinely hoping she might say yes. Every rational part of her brain screamed no. But the part of her that was so tired of being afraid, that was so exhausted from protecting herself, whispered yes. I don't think that's a good idea, she said, which was true, and also cowardly, and also the most sensible thing she could possibly say. Vincent's expression shifted. There was a flash of something raw in his eyes, vulnerability, maybe, or the ghost of disappointment. Fair enough, he said quietly. He left his usual tip, generous, but never excessive, and walked out. Emma stood there, coffee pot in hand, watching him go, and felt like she'd just made a terrible mistake. 2 hours later, a different man walked into the diner. He was older than Vincent, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to catalogue everything in the room in a single glance. He wore a suit that cost more than Emma made in a month. But it was his expression that made her breath catch. There was a gentleness in his face that she hadn't expected to find on a man who looked like he'd seen the worst the world had to offer. He ordered coffee and a sandwich and sat in the booth by the window. Emma served him automatically, professionally, trying to ignore the way his eyes lingered on her face. "You're Emma," he said. It wasn't a question. She froze. "Yes. I'm Angelo," he said simply. "I've been watching you work here for the past week. The way you treat people. The kindness in you. It's rare. Under normal circumstances, Those words would have set off every alarm bell in Emma's head. A man watching her? That was predatory. That was dangerous. That was exactly the kind of thing that happened right before her life fell apart. But Angelo's tone wasn't predatory. If anything, he sounded like a man confessing something he'd been holding onto for far too long. "Thank you," she said carefully, "but I should probably get back to." "I know who you are," Angelo interrupted gently. "I know where you live. I know your routine. And I want you to know that if anyone, and I mean anyone, ever tries to hurt you, you just have to say the word, and I will burn this entire city down to protect you." Emma's blood ran cold. This wasn't a normal confession. This was a threat disguised as a promise. "You're scaring me," she whispered. "Good," Angelo said, and there was genuine sadness in his eyes. "You should be scared. You should be very, very scared. Because you've caught the attention of two men in this city who are not good, Emma. And whatever you do, don't let either of us fall in love with you. It would be the worst thing that could possibly happen to you." He left cash on the table and walked out, leaving Emma standing alone with a coffee pot in her hand and the terrible, dawning realization that her safe, small life had just become significantly more complicated. Emma sat on her worn couch that night, a mug of chamomile tea cooling in her hands, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Two men. Both dangerous. Both seemingly obsessed with her. It was the kind of scenario that should have sent her running straight to the police. But the police couldn't protect her from men like that. She knew this the way she knew her own heartbeat, through bitter, hard-earned experience. 5 years ago, when she'd finally escaped James, she'd gone to the cops. She'd shown them the bruises. She'd told them about the isolation, the control, the way he'd systematically destroyed her sense of self. And you know what they'd done? They'd filed a report. They'd told her to get a restraining order. They'd acted like that piece of paper would somehow stop a man who didn't care about laws or consequences. James had violated that restraining order 4 to 7 times before he'd finally disappeared from her life. 4 to 7 times. And each time, the police had responded hours later, had taken another report, had done absolutely nothing to actually protect her. So Emma had learned a different kind of protection. She'd learned to be invisible. She'd learned to blend into the background of her own life, to make herself small enough that predators might overlook her. And it had worked. For 5 years, it had worked. Until Vincent Steele had walked into Malone's diner on a Tuesday morning. Emma set down her tea and pulled out her phone. She Googled his name before she could stop herself. Vincent Steele, crime boss, Steele organization, murder, extortion, money laundering. There were news articles. Mugshots from 20 years ago when he'd been arrested for aggravated assault. Photos of crime scenes he'd allegedly orchestrated. And through it all, the same dark eyes, the same composed expression, like none of it bothered him at all. She closed the browser. Then she opened it again. Then she typed Angelo Rossi's name. The results were similar. Different organization, same fundamental reality. These were men who had built their empires through violence. Men who had killed people. Men who had destroyed lives as casually as other people ordered coffee. And both of them had decided, for reasons Emma couldn't begin to understand, that she was worth their attention. She thought back to the moment Vincent had asked her to dinner. There had been something desperate in his voice, something that suggested he was reaching across a chasm he didn't know how to cross. She thought about Angelo's warning, delivered with such genuine sadness that it was almost worse than a threat. "Don't let either of us fall in love with you. It would be the worst thing that could possibly happen to you." Emma pulled her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. She was trembling, but she wasn't sure if it was from fear or something far more complicated. Vincent Steele sat in his office on the 42nd floor of a building that didn't officially exist, nursing a glass of whiskey that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and tried to understand what was happening to him. He was a man who'd made his career on control. Control of his emotions, his impulses, his environment. He'd built an empire by calculating every move, anticipating every variable, never letting sentiment or weakness cloud his judgment. And then a waitress had refilled his coffee, and everything he'd spent 20 years building had started to crumble. The thing about Vincent was that most people didn't understand what had made him this way. They saw the expensive suits and the penthouse and the power, and they assumed he'd been born into it, or that he'd simply been ambitious and ruthless enough to take it. The truth was far more pathetic. Vincent's father had been a drunk. His mother had been checked out emotionally, present in body but absent in every way that mattered. He'd grown up in a two-bedroom apartment that smelled like stale beer and broken promises, watching his parents destroy each other through a combination of neglect and resentment. By the time he was 12, he'd already learned that love was a weapon. That caring about someone gave them power over you. That the only way to survive was to feel as little as possible. So he'd trained himself to be numb. And he'd gotten very, very good at it. He'd moved through his 20s building his organization, surrounding himself with men who were just as broken as he was, and he'd never once allowed himself to want anything beyond the next acquisition, the next territory, the next victory. And then Emma. Vincent closed his eyes and thought about the way she'd smiled at the homeless man in the corner booth yesterday morning. She'd sat down beside him for a full minute, asking about his family, about where he'd come from, about what he needed. She'd done it despite the line of customers waiting for refills. She'd done it with such genuine compassion that Vincent had felt something turn over in his chest. He'd spent 2 decades running from feeling. And in one moment, this woman had made him want to feel again. It was terrifying. His phone buzzed. It was Holloway, his lieutenant. "Boss, we found the warehouse where Ross is moving his shipments. We can hit it tonight, take out half his operation." This was the moment where Vincent should have said yes. This was the moment where he should have been planning something devastating, something that would send a message to Angelo Rossi that the Steele organization was not to be trifled with. Instead, Vincent found himself saying, "Not tonight. Wait until next week." "Boss." "I said wait," Vincent repeated, and he heard the edge in his own voice. "Find out everything about Rossi. I want to know his movements, his habits, his vulnerabilities. And I want it done carefully. No moves until I give the order." He hung up the phone without waiting for a response. The thing that terrified Vincent most wasn't that he was obsessed with Emma. It was that he was starting to understand, with a clarity that bordered on painful, that any relationship he tried to build with her would eventually destroy her. Because his world didn't leave room for innocence. His world consumed people like her and left nothing but broken shells behind. So why couldn't he stop thinking about her? Angelo Rossi stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching the city lights spread out below him like a constellation of fallen stars, and thought about the moment he'd seen Emma. It wasn't the first time he'd been in Malone's diner. He'd driven past it dozens of times over the years, a small, unremarkable place in an unremarkable neighborhood. But 3 weeks ago, one of his men had suggested they stop there for lunch while they were out handling business in that part of the city. And that was when he'd seen her. She'd been arguing with a customer, a man who'd made some crude comment as she'd walked past, and her response had been perfect. She'd not matched his aggression with aggression. Instead, she'd responded with such cool, cutting wit that the man had actually looked embarrassed. She'd then smiled at him, as if they'd just shared a private joke, and walked away. Angelo had watched that entire exchange, and he'd thought, there. That's what integrity looks like. He'd spent 42 years building an empire. He'd done things that would make the devil himself uncomfortable. He'd ordered the deaths of men. He'd orchestrated the destruction of families. He'd convinced himself that it was all necessary, all part of the natural order of the world. But watching Emma diffuse a situation with nothing but her own strength of character had made him question everything. The truth about Angelo was that he'd become a crime boss for a reason that was almost laughably tragic. His younger sister, Rosa, had been killed by a gang when he was 15. They'd taken her, abused her, and left her body in an alley like she was nothing. The police had done nothing. The system had failed. And so Angelo had decided that he would become powerful enough to never let that happen to another person under his protection again. Over the years, he'd convinced himself that the violence was righteous. That the control was necessary. That the fear he inspired in others was simply the price they paid for living in a world that didn't care about them. But watching Emma move through her life with such genuine kindness, with such refusal to let her own trauma harden her into someone cold, Angelo had started to suspect that he'd been wrong about everything. He'd built an empire on the belief that the world was cruel and that the only way to survive was to be crueler. But Emma was proof that there was another way. That you could survive brutality and still choose gentleness. That you could be vulnerable without being weak. And now he couldn't stop thinking about her. The irony was almost beautiful in its tragedy. Vincent Steele was obsessed with Emma for the same reason Angelo was. because she represented something they'd both lost long ago. She represented the possibility that they could be something other than what they'd become. She represented redemption in human form. And both of them were intelligent enough to know that getting close to her would be the worst thing they could do to her. Which meant, of course, that neither of them would be able to stop themselves from trying. Back at the diner the next morning, Emma went through the motions of her shift like a ghost. She'd barely slept. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd seen Vincent's face, heard Angelo's warning, felt the weight of being caught between two forces that were far too powerful for her to navigate safely. Her co-worker Jasmine, a woman in her 30s who'd worked at the diner longer than anyone, pulled her aside during the morning rush. "Okay, what's going on with you?" Jasmine asked. "You look like someone died." Emma considered lying. She was good at lying by omission, at hiding the parts of herself that were hurting. But Jasmine was kind, and she was observant, and she'd been nothing but good to Emma in the 3 years they'd worked together. "There are two men," Emma started, then stopped. How could she possibly explain this without sounding insane? "Two men," Jasmine repeated, and a smile spread across her face. "Oh honey. Finally. I was starting to think you were going to spend your whole life serving other people's breakfasts instead of living your own life." "It's not like that," Emma said quickly. They're not normal guys, Jasmine. They're dangerous. They're the kind of dangerous that comes with a body count." Jasmine's smile faded. Oh. Like that kind of dangerous." Emma nodded miserably. "Okay," Jasmine said slowly. "So what's the play? Are you going to avoid them? Are you going to tell them to leave you alone?" "I don't think I can," Emma admitted. "I don't think they're the type to take no for an answer. And honestly, I don't think I want to. Which makes me a complete idiot." "Or maybe," Jasmine said gently, "it makes you human. Maybe it makes you someone who recognizes that the scariest things in life are sometimes the best things that can happen to us." Emma wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that she'd already learned that lesson in the worst possible way, that opening herself up to someone powerful was just a faster path to devastation. But before she could respond, the door to the diner opened, and Vincent Steele walked in. He was alone, which was unusual. Normally there were shadows around him, men in suits with cold eyes who stood near doorways and windows. Today he looked almost vulnerable in his solitude. He sat in his usual booth, and when Emma brought over the coffee, he caught her hand gently. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for putting you on the spot yesterday. For asking you to dinner without knowing if that's something you'd want. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at anything that doesn't involve control and force. But I meant what I said. I want to take you to dinner. No pressure. No expectations. Just a chance to know you outside of this diner." Emma's heart was thundering in her chest. This close to him, she could see the details of his face, the scar on his left eyebrow, the faint lines around his eyes, the way his pupils dilated when he looked at her. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay, yes. Tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. Vincent's entire expression transformed. There was a moment of pure, unguarded joy on his face, and then he caught himself, pulling back into composure. "Thank you," he said simply. And then he released her hand and picked up his coffee. Emma walked away on shaking legs, and didn't notice Angelo Rossi watching from a car parked across the street, his hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to turn his knuckles white. "Okay, so we're getting deeper into this, and I need to know what you're thinking so far. Comment below, who do you think Emma should choose? Team Vincent or Team Angelo? And more importantly, do you think either of these men can actually be redeemed? Seriously, the comments are where the magic happens on this channel. That's how I know you're invested in these stories. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now's the time. Because part 3 is where everything explodes. Both of these men are about to make moves that will change everything. The restaurant was called Ascendery, and it was the kind of place where reservations were made months in advance by people with names that appeared in society magazines. Vincent had secured a private dining room on the top floor with a single phone call. That was the kind of power he wielded, the ability to reshape the world to his specifications with barely any effort. Emma stood outside the restaurant for 5 minutes before she could make herself walk in. She'd spent 2 hours that afternoon deciding what to wear. She'd tried on every piece of clothing she owned, which wasn't much. Everything in her wardrobe was designed to be invisible, dark colors, modest cuts, nothing that drew attention. But this dinner felt like it demanded something different. In the end, she'd chosen a simple black dress that she'd bought years ago and never worn. It was elegant without being ostentatious, confident without being aggressive. It made her feel like someone other than the frightened girl who'd escaped James, but it didn't make her feel like she was pretending to be someone she wasn't. When she entered the restaurant, a hostess with perfectly coiffed hair and a practiced smile led her through the dining room and up a private elevator. Emma's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The elevator doors opened onto a space that took her breath away. The private dining room had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. The table was small and intimate, set with crystal glasses and white linen and silverware that looked like it belonged in a museum. And standing by the window, watching the city lights with his hands in his pockets, was Vincent. He turned when he heard the elevator doors open, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Hi," Emma said finally, because someone had to say something, and the silence was becoming unbearable. "Hi," Vincent replied, and there was wonder in his voice, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You look beautiful." It was a simple compliment, but the way he delivered it made Emma believe he meant it in a way that went far deeper than appearance. Like he was seeing past her skin and bones and into the parts of her that mattered. "Thank you," she said softly. "This place is incredible." "I wanted somewhere that felt like it existed outside of the normal world," Vincent said. "Somewhere that felt like it could hold something precious without being tainted by everything else." There was a vulnerability in that statement that made Emma's chest ache. She walked toward him slowly, and when he offered his hand, she took it. His skin was warm. His grip was gentle but firm, and when she looked up at his face, she saw something she hadn't expected to find: fear. Real, genuine fear in the eyes of a man who wielded the kind of power that made other people tremble. "I need to tell you some things," Vincent said as he led her to the table. A server appeared almost immediately with wine, setting glasses down and disappearing like a ghost. "I need to tell you who I am, and what I do, and why it's a terrible idea for you to be here with me." "Okay," Emma said, sitting across from him. "Tell me." Vincent took a long sip of wine. "I'm a crime boss. I run an organization that does terrible things. I've ordered people's deaths. I've destroyed families. I've spent 20 years becoming something that isn't really human anymore. And I don't say that as an excuse or as a way of trying to gain your sympathy. I say it because you deserve to know exactly what you're dealing with." Emma listened to him describe his business in clinical terms: the extortion operations, the money laundering, the control of certain neighborhoods through fear and violence. He didn't minimize it or justify it. He simply laid it out, bare and brutal. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked when he finished. "Because I want you to have a choice," Vincent said. "Most people in my life don't have choices. They're caught in my orbit and they either serve me or they oppose me. But you. I want you to know exactly who I am, and I want you to walk out of here if that's what you need to do. I won't stop you. I won't hurt you. I'll let you go." "But you don't want me to leave," Emma said. "No," Vincent admitted. "God, no. I want you to stay more than I've wanted anything in my entire life. But I want it to be an informed choice." Emma picked up her own wine glass and took a long sip. She was shaking, but not from fear. She was shaking because she was starting to understand something about herself, that she'd spent 5 years protecting herself from feeling anything, and it had worked, and it had also been the slowest kind of dying. "I was in an abusive relationship," she said quietly. "For 4 years. He isolated me from everyone I loved. He made me feel like I was crazy, like I deserved the things he did to me. When I finally left him, I spent the first 6 months thinking I'd made a mistake. I thought maybe I should go back, apologize, try harder." Vincent was listening with complete attention, leaning forward slightly. "But then I realized something," Emma continued. "I realized that what happened to me wasn't about who I was or what I did. It was about what he was, someone who needed to control people because he felt so out of control in his own life. And I realized that I couldn't prevent that from happening to me again by making myself small. I could only prevent it by knowing myself, by being strong enough to recognize it if it started happening again." "Are you saying you see me as someone who's going to hurt you?" Vincent asked, and there was real pain in his voice. "No," Emma said. I'm saying that I see you as someone who's honest with me about who he is. And I think that's the most important thing. I think honesty is the difference between Vincent Steele the crime boss and James the abuser. James lied about everything. He made me question my own reality. But you're offering me the truth. The truth is that I'm dangerous, Vincent said quietly. We're all dangerous, Emma replied. We're all capable of hurting people we love. But most people pretend they are not. Most people hide behind civility and social convention and the illusion that they are good people. You're not hiding. You're not pretending. And I respect that. The server returned with the first course, and they ate in companionable silence for a moment. Then Vincent said, "Tell me about him. Tell me about James." So Emma did. She told him about the early days when everything had felt perfect, about the slow descent into control and manipulation, about the moment she'd realized she needed to leave. She told him about the nights she'd spent terrified in her own apartment, about the way she'd had to rebuild herself from nothing. And Vincent listened without judgment, without interruption, occasionally reaching across the table to touch her hand like he was anchoring her in the present moment. By the time they reached dessert, Emma felt like she'd been turned inside out. She'd revealed parts of herself that she'd never shown anyone, vulnerabilities that she'd worked so hard to bury. And Vincent was still there. He hadn't left. He hadn't made her feel ashamed or broken or damaged. "I want to take care of you," Vincent said as they finished their meal. "Not in a controlling way. Not in a way that takes your autonomy. But I want to make sure that you never feel unsafe again. I want to use all the power and resources I have to create a world where nothing can hurt you." "That's not how love works," Emma said softly. "Love isn't about controlling the world. It's about having someone in your corner while you navigate the world as it is." "Then let me be in your corner," Vincent said. "Let me be the person you know will always have your back, no matter what." Emma wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe that it could be that simple. But as they stood to leave the restaurant, she felt her phone buzz in her purse. She pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. "Emma. It's Angelo. I need you to know that what just happened tonight is being watched. Vincent will keep you safe from the outside world, but who will keep you safe from him? I'm asking you to meet me. Just once. So I can explain what he's not telling you." Emma's blood went cold. Vincent's phone buzzed at almost the exact same moment. It was a video. He opened it in the elevator as they descended, and what he saw made his vision go white. It was footage from inside a sendery. From inside the private dining room. Someone had been watching them. Someone had recorded their entire conversation. And the text that accompanied the video was from one of Angelo Rossi's known lieutenants. "Boss wants you to know he was watching. Boss wants you to know that nothing you do is private. And boss wants you to know that the girl is smarter than you are. She'll figure out soon enough which one of you is actually worth her time." Vincent looked at Emma, who was staring at her own phone with an expression of dawning horror. "What is it?" he asked. "Angelo," Emma whispered. "He's asking me to meet him. He says you're not telling me something. He says he's trying to drive a wedge between us," Vincent said, but even as the words came out, he knew it wasn't quite true. Angelo had just proven that he could get to Emma anytime he wanted. That Vincent's protection was an illusion. Did he have someone watching us? Emma asked. During dinner. Vincent wanted to lie. He wanted to protect her from the reality of what had just happened. But he'd promised her honesty, and he wasn't about to break that promise in the first 5 hours of whatever this was. "Yes," he said. "He did. I'm sorry. I thought the private room would be secure. I was wrong." Emma's hands were shaking. "This is insane. I'm not a piece in a chess game. I'm not something to be fought over." "I know," Vincent said. "I know, and I'm sorry. But you have to understand, Angelo doesn't give up. He's not going to stop, and he's not going to let you walk away just because you ask him to. The only way to keep you safe is to make sure he understands that you're under my protection." "And how exactly are you going to do that?" Emma asked, but her voice had changed. There was a resignation in it now, a recognition that her small, safe life was officially over. "I don't know yet," Vincent admitted. "But I'll figure it out. I promise you, I will figure it out." Angelo stood in his penthouse, watching the video feed from Ascendery on a large screen, and felt something turn over in his chest. Delacroix was standing beside him, equally grim. Boss, if Vincent finds out you were watching. He already knows, Angelo interrupted. He's smart enough to realize I'd have people in place. And now Emma knows too. On the screen, Vincent was holding Emma's hand, pulling her close, and Angelo could see the exact moment when Emma's expression shifted from wonder to fear. Good, Angelo thought bitterly. Good. Let her be afraid. Let her understand that getting close to either of us is a death sentence. But even as he thought it, he was making decisions. He was ordering his men to prepare the safest location in his organization, a place where Emma could stay if things got too dangerous. He was reaching out to contacts in law enforcement to make sure that if Vincent made a move that put Emma in the crossfire, there would be protection available. He was, in other words, doing exactly what he'd told Emma he would do. He was burning the city down to protect her. The irony was that by doing so, he was proving Vincent's point, that loving either of them was the worst thing that could possibly happen to her. Okay, stop. I need to pause here because this is the moment where everything changes. We just had. Vincent and Emma have an intimate, vulnerable dinner. Angelo reveals he's been watching them the entire time. Both men are now escalating their pursuit. Emma realizes she's trapped between two forces she can't control. This is where I need you. Comment right now, what do you think Emma should do? And do you think there's any way these two men can coexist, or is it going to come down to total war? Seriously, your comments drive this story forward. I read every single one of them, and sometimes you guys predict exactly what's going to happen next. So drop your theories, your fears, your predictions in the comments section. And if you're not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. The next part is where the real danger starts. Emma stood outside the coffee shop on 6th and Marquis, her phone in her hand, Angelo's address burned into her memory. She'd spent the entire night after the ascendery dinner staring at her ceiling, listening to the ambient noise of her apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing on the street below, the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. Vincent had wanted to stay. He'd suggested they go back to his penthouse, that she spend the night somewhere safe, surrounded by his security. But Emma had refused. She needed space. She needed to think. She needed to understand what was happening to her and why two powerful men were willing to wage war over someone who served them coffee. At 3 a.m, she texted Angelo, "I'll meet you. But on my terms." His response had been immediate, "Anywhere you want." So she'd chosen a public place. A coffee shop in neutral territory, not in any man's domain, where witnesses would ensure she wasn't in immediate physical danger. It was the smartest move she could make, but it also felt deeply, achingly foolish. At 7 a.m, she'd called in sick to the diner. Then she'd showered, dressed, and taken the subway across town, being deliberately careful not to be followed. Angelo was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with a black coffee and a newspaper he wasn't actually reading. He looked up when she approached, and there was something in his expression that made her heart catch. He looked sad. Not dangerous, not predatory, just deeply, genuinely sad. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Emma sat, her body tense, ready to run at the first sign of threat. "You said Vincent wasn't telling me something." "He's not," Angelo said. He folded the newspaper carefully. "But before I tell you what it is, I want to be honest about why I'm telling you. I'm telling you because I want you to choose me. I'm telling you because I'm trying to manipulate you, the same way Vincent is manipulating you, just with different tactics. And I think you deserve to know that about me from the start." Emma hadn't expected honesty. She'd expected manipulation dressed up as protection. But Angelo's candor was almost more unsettling. "Okay," she said slowly. "So tell me, what isn't Vincent telling me?" Angelo reached into his jacket, and Emma's body went rigid, ready to scream. But all he pulled out was a file folder. He set it on the table between them. "Vincent's father," Angelo said quietly, "didn't die of natural causes like Vincent probably told you. Or maybe he didn't tell you anything about his father. Either way, here's the truth. Vincent's father was a small-time loan shark who made a lot of mistakes. When Vincent was 18, his father owed money to the wrong people. And those people decided that the best way to send a message was to burn down Vincent's apartment building with his parents inside." Emma's hands flew to her mouth. "Vincent survived because he wasn't home that night," Angelo continued. "He was out with a girl, a girl named Sarah. By the time he got back to the neighborhood, the building was already engulfed. His parents died in that fire. 17 other people died in that fire. And it was completely preventable, because Vincent's father had come to me asking for help. He'd wanted to borrow money from my organization to pay off his debts. Why didn't you help him? Emma whispered. Because I was 24 years old and I was still grieving my sister, Angelo said. Because I was angry at the world and I didn't trust anyone who came to me begging. Because I was, in many ways, an even worse person than I am now. I turned him away. I told him it wasn't my problem. And then I watched a man I could have saved burn to death along with his wife and 17 innocent people. Emma tried to process this. Does Vincent know that you? No, Angelo said. That's the first part of what Vincent isn't telling you. He doesn't know that I was ever asked for help. He doesn't know that I could have prevented the fire. And I've gone to great lengths to make sure he never finds out, because the moment he does, any possibility of peace between us disappears forever. What's the second part? Emma asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. The second part, Angelo said, is that Vincent didn't just become a crime boss because he was angry or ambitious. He became a crime boss because he was trying to find the men responsible for the fire. And when he finally found them, when he finally tracked down every single person who had anything to do with it, he killed them all. He spent 5 years on a vendetta of pure vengeance. And in the process, he built an empire. Angelo leaned forward. I'm telling you this because Vincent is a man who can love you with his entire being, but he can also destroy you with that same intensity if you ever become a threat to him. He doesn't know how to do anything halfway. He's never learned that skill. And you have? Emma asked, her voice sharp with an anger she didn't know she felt. No, Angelo admitted. But at least I know my own limitations. At least I'm trying to be something other than what I was. Vincent is still running from his trauma. He's still trying to control the world so that nothing bad can ever happen to him again. And that's not healthy for you. Emma stood up. She needed to walk, needed to move, needed to do something other than sit there and absorb the weight of what Angelo was telling her. Why are you really telling me this? She demanded. Don't tell me it's because you care about my well-being. You're doing this because you want me to be afraid of Vincent. You want me to push him away so that you have a clearer path to me. Yes, Angelo said simply. I want all of those things. But I'm also telling you the truth, and the truth is that you deserve to make informed decisions about your own life. You deserve to know who these men really are. I already know who Vincent really is, Emma said, her voice shaking. I know he's a crime boss. I know he's done terrible things. He told me that himself, and he did it without requiring you to bring me evidence like I'm some kind of prosecutor building a case. She grabbed her jacket and turned toward the door. Emma, wait, Angelo started. But Emma was already walking away. She walked out of the coffee shop and into the morning light, and she didn't stop walking until she'd reached the park 3 blocks away. Vincent found her there, sitting on a bench overlooking the pond, feeding breadcrumbs to ducks that couldn't possibly care less about her emotional turmoil. She didn't know how he'd found her. Later, she would realize it was probably because he'd had people following her, watching her, tracking her movements. But in that moment, his appearance felt like magic, like he'd sensed her distress and simply manifested himself into her life. How did you? She started. I had people following you, Vincent said without preamble. I know that violates your trust. I know that it's controlling and invasive and exactly the kind of thing that should send you running. But you're not running, which suggests that some part of you understands why I felt like I had to do it. Emma wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Angelo met with me this morning. Vincent's entire body went still. Where? A coffee shop. Neutral ground. He told me about your parents, about the fire, about the vendetta you went on to avenge them. She watched Vincent's face carefully, trying to read his reaction. There was pain there, raw, old pain that had never quite healed. But there was also anger, and something that looked like betrayal. He had no right, Vincent said quietly. Maybe he didn't, Emma agreed. But he told me the truth. And I'm starting to realize that I don't actually know what the truth is anymore. I don't know if you're protecting me or controlling me. I don't know if Angelo is trying to help me or trying to manipulate me. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do about the fact that I have feelings for both of you. That last part hung in the air between them like a physical thing. You have feelings for him? Vincent asked, and there was something dangerous in his voice now. I have confused feelings, Emma clarified. I have feelings for you too, Vincent. I have feelings for both of you, and that makes me either very wise or very stupid, and I can't figure out which. Vincent sat down next to her. He didn't touch her, didn't try to comfort her. He just sat there, present, bearing witness to her confusion. Angelo is right about some things, he said finally. I am a man who loves intensely. I am a man who has a tendency toward control. And I did go on a vendetta that probably wasn't healthy. But he left out some crucial context. Which is that after I killed the men responsible for my parents' deaths, I realized that vengeance didn't bring them back. It didn't make me feel better. It just made me feel hollow. And so I made a decision to build something instead of just destroying things. I decided to create an organization that worked differently than the other crime families. One where we protected people instead of preying on them. One where we enforced a code of honor that actually meant something. That's still crime, Emma said. That's still extortion and money laundering and violence. Yes, Vincent agreed. But it's a different kind of crime. And I say that not as a justification, but as a fact. My organization doesn't prey on the vulnerable. We don't move drugs in neighborhoods where children live. We don't engage in human trafficking. We're involved in gambling, high-end theft, political corruption, things that the wealthy and powerful are already engaged in. We just take a cut and enforce a code. Emma turned to look at him. Are you trying to convince me that you're the lesser of two evils? No, Vincent said. I'm trying to convince you that I'm a man who is actively trying to be better than I was. And I'm asking you to believe that I can continue to be better, specifically because of you. And Angelo? What do you think about what he told me? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. I think he's operating from a place of genuine guilt about my parents' death. I think he's terrified that if you stay with me, he'll lose you forever. And I think he's hoping that by revealing that guilt to you, he can create a sense of obligation or sympathy that will make you choose him instead. Did you know? Emma asked. That he could have helped your father. I suspected, Vincent said. I've spent 20 years building an information network. It would have been strange if I didn't know something about one of the most significant moments in my life. And you didn't. I mean, you didn't try to kill him for it. Oh, I've thought about it extensively, Vincent said. I've planned it in detail. I've imagined it. But I've also come to understand that Angelo was a broken man at that time, just like I was. And killing him for the mistakes he made when he was broken would be like killing my own past self. And I've already done enough violence. He finally turned to look at her. The fact that I can think about him and not immediately want to destroy him is because of you. Because knowing you, being around you, is making me want to be someone different. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person, Emma said softly. I know, Vincent acknowledged. And I'm sorry for that. But it's the truth, and I promised you truth. 2 hours later, Emma's phone rang. It was Tony, her manager at the diner. Hey, where are you? He asked. We've got a situation. Emma's stomach dropped. What kind of situation? The restaurant got a visit from some guys in suits. They asked about you by name. They wanted to know your address, your schedule, where you liked to go. I didn't tell them anything, but Emma, these guys were scary. Really scary. Like, they had the kind of presence that made everyone in the restaurant nervous. Emma looked at Vincent. His expression had shifted into something cold and calculating. I'm coming to the diner right now, Emma said. Tell everyone to stay calm. Tell them it's going to be okay. She hung up the phone. Someone's making a move, she said to Vincent. Not mine, Vincent said immediately. I would never. I know it's not you, Emma interrupted. It's him. It's Angelo. He's trying to show me that your protection isn't complete. Vincent was already standing, already pulling out his phone, already calling for his car. We need to get you somewhere safe. No, Emma said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. I need to confront this. I need to understand what's happening. And I need to do it in a place where there are witnesses and where I can call the police if things go wrong. Emma, that's not a good idea. It's my idea, she said. And you're going to let me make it? Vincent looked like he wanted to argue, but he also knew that if he pushed too hard, he'd prove everything Angelo had said about him being controlling. So instead, he did something that probably cost him more than anything else he could have done. He stepped back. He gave her space. He let her choose her own path, even though every instinct he had was screaming at him to lock her away where nothing could touch her. Okay, he said. But I'm going with you to the diner. And I'm going to have people positioned around the block. If anything goes wrong, if anyone tries to hurt you, we're extracting you immediately. Okay, Emma agreed. But you have to promise me something. What? You have to promise me that you won't start a war with Angelo unless he actually makes a direct move against me. You have to promise that you'll let me handle this, at least at first. Vincent wanted to refuse. Every cell in his body was screaming at him to refuse. But he looked at her face, saw the determination there, saw a woman who had survived one abuser and was refusing to trade one form of control for another. I promise, he said. But Emma, if anything happens, then I know exactly who to call, she finished. Okay, we are in the thick of it now. We've got Vincent, trying to be better, learning to let Emma have agency, but clearly ready to go to war. Angelo, making aggressive moves to prove Vincent can't protect her. Emma, refusing to be controlled by either of them, but caught in the middle of a rising conflict. This is the moment where the romance deepens while the danger escalates. And I need to know what you think. Comment right now. Do you think Angelo's move on the diner is a romantic gesture, trying to prove he's the stronger protector, or a genuine threat? And more importantly, what do you think Emma should do when she faces him? If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. The next part is where one of these men is going to do something absolutely shocking, and you need to see it unfold in real time. The diner was eerily quiet when Emma arrived. It was mid-afternoon, that dead zone between the lunch rush and the dinner crowd when Malone's usually had a handful of regulars nursing coffee and reading newspapers. Today, there was only one customer, Angelo Rossi, sitting in Emma's favorite booth by the window, a cup of untouched coffee in front of him. Vincent had wanted to come inside, but Emma had insisted he stay in the car parked across the street. She could feel his presence though, feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing as she walked through the diner door. Tony appeared immediately from the kitchen, his face pale with anxiety. Emma, I'm so sorry. These guys came in and... It's okay, Emma said, touching his arm briefly. I told them. It's going to be fine. She wasn't sure that was true, but she said it anyway. Angelo looked up as she approached the booth. He stood, an oddly formal gesture that somehow made the moment more surreal, and gestured for her to sit across from him. Thank you for coming, he said. You sent men to intimidate my co-workers, Emma said, not bothering with pleasantries. That's not okay. That's not romantic. That's not noble. That's exactly the kind of thing that should make me run as far away from you as possible. You're right, Angelo said, surprising her. It was a mistake. I was trying to prove something to Vincent, and in doing so, I frightened innocent people. That's not who I want to be. He sat back down, and Emma remained standing, arms crossed over her chest. Then why did you do it? Because I'm terrified, Angelo said simply. I'm terrified that I'm going to lose you before I even have the chance to show you that I'm worth choosing. I'm terrified that Vincent has already won because he got to you first, because he's already buried himself so deeply in your life that extricating him would be impossible. So you decided to escalate things? You decided to prove that you're more powerful? No, Angelo said. I decided to prove that I'm just as dangerous as he is. And I did it badly. I did it in a way that hurt people who had nothing to do with any of this. And I'm sorry. Emma sat down finally, her anger warring with confusion. Angelo looked genuinely remorseful, but she'd learned the hard way that appearance and reality were often completely divorced from each other. There's something else I need to tell you, Angelo continued. Something that both Vincent and I have been keeping from you. Something that changes everything. What? Emma asked, her pulse picking up. The men who came to your diner today, Angelo said. They weren't my men. They were from the Castellano family. Emma felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. The Castellano family. They are a rival organization, Angelo explained. Much older, much more ruthless than either the Steele or Rossi families. They've been expanding into our territories for the past year, and things have gotten increasingly violent. About 3 weeks ago, one of my operations was hit. 17 of my men died. It was a message. The Castellanos wanted to make it clear that they were a force to be reckoned with. Okay, but what does that have to do with? It has everything to do with you, Angelo interrupted. The Castellano family doesn't know who you are. They don't know that both Vincent and I are obsessed with you. But they've figured out that you're important to us. And they are planning to use you as leverage. Emma's hands started shaking. Use me how? They're going to kidnap you, Angelo said flatly. They're going to take you as insurance, as a way to negotiate territorial boundaries with both of us. And whichever one of us cares more about you, whichever one of us is willing to concede territory or resources, that will determine what happens to you next. Why are you telling me this? Emma whispered. Because I want you to understand that this isn't about romance anymore, Angelo said. This isn't about two men competing for your affection. This is about survival. This is about you becoming collateral damage in a war that you had nothing to do with starting. Emma stood up. She felt like the diner was spinning around her, like the walls were tilting inward. I need to leave. I need to get out of the city. I need to. You can't, Angelo said quietly. The Castellanos have people watching every exit out of the city. They have people tracking your movements. The only way you survive this is if you stay under protection. And the only way you stay under protection is if you help us, if you help Vincent and me work together to figure out what they want and how we can give it to them without it meaning your death. This is insane, Emma said. This is absolutely insane. I should go to the police. I should. The Castellanos have cops on their payroll, Angelo interrupted. Going to the police won't help you. It will probably just speed up their timeline. Emma sat back down because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She was trapped. She'd spent 5 years building a safe life, and in the span of a few days, she'd managed to entangle herself with 2 crime bosses, and now she was caught in the middle of a territorial war. How long do I have? She asked. We don't know, Angelo said. It could be days. It could be weeks. But it's coming. The Castellanos are planning something, and it involves you. The diner door opened, and Vincent walked in. He'd clearly decided that waiting in the car was no longer an option. He moved through the space with the kind of controlled authority that made everyone else in the restaurant unconsciously move out of his way. When he reached the booth, he didn't ask permission, he simply sat down next to Emma, close enough that their bodies were almost touching. You told her, he said to Angelo. It wasn't a question. She deserved to know, Angelo replied. Agreed, Vincent said. He turned to Emma. What Angelo is telling you is true. The Castellanos are making a move. What he's not telling you is that we've already started preparing for it. We've already begun assembling a counter-strategy. What kind of counter-strategy? Emma asked. One that requires your cooperation, Vincent said. One that requires you to trust both of us, even though we're rival organizations, even though we're competitors in every other aspect of our lives. What are you going to do? Emma asked. Vincent and Angelo exchanged a look, a moment of silent communication that suggested they'd been discussing this, planning this, for longer than Emma realized. We're going to let them take you, Vincent said. Emma's breath caught in her throat. What? Not really, Angelo said quickly. But we're going to make them think they can. We're going to set up a situation where they believe they have the opportunity to grab you, and when they do, we're going to be waiting. It's a trap, Vincent explained. We're going to use you as bait to draw out the Castellano organization. And when they move on you, we're going to be in position to take them down. You want me to be bait, Emma said flatly. I want you to be the key to ending this, Vincent said. The Castellanos have been bleeding both our organizations for months. They've killed dozens of our men. They've taken territory, operations, money. And they've done it because they have superior numbers and superior firepower. But they've made a mistake. They've decided that you're valuable. And that mistake is going to be what brings them down. And if something goes wrong? Emma asked. If your trap fails. Then we have contingencies, Angelo said. Safe houses. A private plane waiting at an airfield outside the city. Money, fake documents, Everything you need to disappear and start over somewhere else. You've really thought this through, Emma said bitterly. We have, Vincent confirmed. Because you matter to us, and we're not going to lose you. Emma looked between the two men. In any other circumstance, she might have found it romantic that they'd put this much thought into her safety. But in this moment, all she could feel was trapped. Trapped between her desire for independence and her need for protection. Trapped between two powerful men who cared about her but who were fundamentally incapable of letting her make her own choices. I want to think about it, she said finally. You don't have time to think about it, Vincent said gently. The Costillanos are moving this week. We need to set up the trap by tomorrow night. Then I want to meet with someone from the Castellano organization, Emma said. I want to hear directly from them what they want. I want to understand what I'm walking into before I agree to be bait in your war. Absolutely not, Vincent said immediately. I'm going to, Emma said, with a firmness that surprised all three of them. Because if I'm going to risk my life, I deserve to know exactly what I'm risking it for. I deserve to hear directly from them what's at stake. It's too dangerous, Angelo said. Everything is dangerous, Emma replied. At least if I meet with them directly, I'll have some agency in this situation. Right now, I feel like a pawn. And I've already spent 5 years being a pawn in someone else's game. I'm not doing it again. Vincent and Angelo exchanged another look, a longer one this time, a look that suggested they were having an entire conversation without words. Okay, Vincent said finally. But we arranged the meeting. We set the terms. And we have people positioned to protect you. Fine, Emma agreed. But I get to talk to them alone. No hidden men. No backup. Just me and whoever represents the Castellano family. No, both men said simultaneously. Then we're done talking, Emma said, standing up. I'm not agreeing to anything until I get what I'm asking for. She walked past both of them toward the diner door. Neither man tried to stop her physically, but Vincent called out as she was leaving. If you walk out of here without us, the Costillanos will know you're unprotected. They'll make their move immediately. Emma paused at the door. Then she turned back. Then set up the meeting, she said. And tell them I want to talk. Wait. Did you catch what just happened? Emma went from scared victim to someone who's actually trying to negotiate her own safety. She's not letting Vincent or Angelo control her. She's inserting herself into this situation on her own terms. And here's the real question. Is she being brave, or is she walking straight into a trap that she doesn't understand? Because here's what I need you to understand about this moment. Emma thinks she's regaining control. But Vincent and Angelo have allowed her to think that because they know something she doesn't. And that something is about to blow this entire story wide open. Comment below. Do you think Emma is making a smart move, or is she playing right into the hands of people far more dangerous than she realizes? And seriously, if you're not subscribed yet, you need to be. Because the next part, part 6, the darkest hour, is where things go completely sideways. Everything Emma thinks she understands about Vincent, Angelo, and even herself is about to be shattered. Subscribe now because you do not want to miss what happens next. The meeting was arranged for midnight in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. It was the kind of place that existed in the shadows of the city, the kind of place where deals were made and bodies were disposed of and the normal rules of civilization didn't apply. Emma had insisted on the location because it was neutral territory, not Vincent's space, not Angelo's space, not the Costillanos' traditional area of operation. Vincent had wanted to come with her. Angelo had suggested he bring at least one guard. Emma had refused both. She'd dressed carefully, dark jeans, a simple black sweater, nothing that suggested wealth or status or affiliation with either crime family. She wanted to appear vulnerable but capable. Frightened but intelligent. As she arrived at the warehouse, she tried to control her breathing. The parking lot was empty except for 2 black SUVs parked near the entrance. This was it. This was the moment where she would finally understand what was happening. A man in an expensive suit emerged from one of the SUVs as she approached. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes that had seen decades of violence. He introduced himself simply as Marco. "Miss Emma," he said, gesturing toward the warehouse. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "I don't feel like I had much choice," Emma replied. "You always have choices, Marco said, and there was something almost kind in his voice. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. He led her inside the warehouse. The space was vast and echoing, filled with the ghosts of whatever industrial operation had once occupied it. In the center of the cavernous space, there was a single table with 2 chairs. Marco gestured for Emma to sit. She did, hyper-aware that she was completely vulnerable in this moment, that if Marco decided to hurt her, there was no one here to stop him. Vincent Steele and Angelo Rossi, Marco said, settling into the chair across from her. 2 powerful men. 2 rival organizations. And both of them, completely obsessed with you. I know who they are, Emma said. Do you? Marco asked. Do you really know who they are? Do you know what they've done? Do you know what they are willing to do for you? Why don't you tell me? Emma said, steadying her voice. Marco pulled out a file folder and set it on the table between them. My family has been watching you, Miss Emma. We've been watching you move through the city, watching how you live, watching how you treat people. And we've been wondering, why would 2 of the most powerful men in this city risk everything for a waitress? What's special about you? He opened the file. Inside were photographs. Photographs of Emma at the diner. Photographs of her apartment building. Photographs of her with Vincent at a sendery. Photographs of her meeting with Angelo at the coffee shop. My grandson, Marco continued, was killed 6 months ago. He was 23 years old. He was dealing with a small operation that we were running out of a neighborhood in the South Side. And he was murdered by a man who worked for Vincent Steele. The murder was brutal. The man who killed him was never prosecuted because Vincent paid off the cops to make it disappear. Emma's stomach clenched. She didn't know what to say. My grandson's name was David, Marco said. He had dreams of going to college. He wanted to be an engineer. But my family needed money, and I needed reliable people, and so I brought him into the business. And I got him killed. Marco pulled out another photograph. It was of a young man with bright eyes and an open face. He looked nothing like the hardened criminals Emma had come to associate with organized crime. He just looked like a kid. I've spent the last 6 months wondering what to do, Marco continued. Do I retaliate? Do I kill Vincent's people? Do I destroy everything he's built? Or do I try something different? Do I try something that might actually teach him a lesson about the choices he makes? The kidnapping, Emma said quietly. Using me as leverage. No, Marco said, and there was something almost sad in his expression. If I wanted you as leverage, I would have already taken you. My men could have grabbed you a dozen times over the past week. Instead, I wanted to meet with you. I wanted you to understand what's at stake. He leaned forward slightly. Vincent Steele is obsessed with you. And that obsession is dangerous. Because men like Vincent don't love, they consume. They take the things they want and they reshape them into versions of themselves. He would destroy you, Miss Emma. He would remake you in his image until the kind and gentle woman you are right now would disappear completely. And you telling me this because? Emma asked. Because I'm offering you a choice, Marco said. Leave the city. Leave both of them. Take the money I'm going to give you, start a new life somewhere else, somewhere safe. Because if you stay, if you continue to entangle yourself with Vincent or Angelo, you will become collateral damage in a war that you didn't start and that you can't win. What about the trap? Emma asked. Vincent and Angelo are planning to ambush you when you try to take me. I know, Marco said calmly. I've known about their plans for the past 72 hours. I have sources inside both organizations. But I'm not going to move on you, Miss Emma. I'm going to let them believe that I'm coming, and I'm going to let their trap fail by doing nothing. And in the process, I'm going to teach them a lesson about what it means to build an empire on lies. He stood up and pulled out an envelope. $500,000. A passport under a new name. Contact information for people who can help you disappear. And an address for a house in Costa Rica where you can start over. Emma stared at the envelope. It was the easiest solution. It was the escape hatch she'd been looking for since the moment Angelo had warned her that both men were dangerous. Why would you help me? She asked. Because my grandson deserved better, Marco said. And because if Vincent thinks you've run, if he thinks you've abandoned him, it will hurt him in a way that violence never could. It will teach him that his obsession, his need to control, his inability to let people make their own choices, that all of those things have consequences. And what about Angelo? Emma asked. Marco smiled, and it was a terrible smile. Angelo Rossi is a different animal. Angelo actually cares about people. Angelo has been trying to change for years. I have no quarrel with Angelo. My quarrel is with Vincent. Emma picked up the envelope. Her hands were shaking. There's something else you should know, Marco said as she stood to leave. Something that both Vincent and Angelo have been keeping from you. What? Emma asked, though part of her didn't want to know any more truths. James, Marco said. Your ex. The man who abused you. Do you know where he is? Emma's blood turned to ice. What do you mean, where he is? He's been in the city for the past 2 weeks, Marco said. He came back looking for you. He's been trying to track you down. And Vincent knows about it. Angelo knows about it. But neither of them has told you because they're using it as leverage to keep you close to them. They're using your fear against you. Emma ran. She ran out of the warehouse and into the night, the envelope still in her hands, her mind spinning with revelations that didn't fit together, truths that contradicted each other, lies that had been built on more lies. She ran until she found a coffee shop that was open late, and she sat in a corner booth with a cup of coffee that she didn't drink and tried to make sense of what had just happened. James was in the city. James was looking for her. And Vincent and Angelo both knew about it and hadn't told her. She pulled out her phone and called Vincent. Emma, he answered on the first ring. Where are you? The meeting should have been. James is in the city, she interrupted. You know about it, don't you? You've known the whole time. There was a long silence. Emma. Don't lie to me, she said. Not about this. Tell me the truth. Yes, Vincent said finally. We've known for 2 weeks. We have people watching him. We know where he sleeps, what he eats, every person he contacts. We're keeping him away from you. Without telling me, Emma said. You're protecting me without my consent. You're making decisions about my safety without my input. That's exactly what he did, Vincent. That's exactly the kind of control that made me leave him in the first place. I was trying to protect you, Vincent said, and there was anguish in his voice. You were trying to control me, Emma corrected. You were trying to keep me dependent on you for my safety. That's not love, Vincent. That's possession. She hung up before he could respond. Then she called Angelo. Tell me about James, she said when he picked up. Emma, where are you? Are you safe? Answer the question. Yes, we know he's in the city, Angelo admitted. And yes, we've been keeping it from you because we knew it would frighten you. We were trying to protect you. By lying to me, Emma said. By making me dependent on you without my knowledge. By turning me into someone who can't make informed decisions about her own life. Emma, Angelo started, but she hung up. She sat alone in the coffee shop, the envelope from Marco on the table in front of her, and felt something break inside her chest. The truth was that she'd been right all along. Both men were dangerous. Not because they were criminals, she'd come to terms with that. But because they couldn't let her exist as her own person. They had to remake her in their image. They had to make her dependent on them for safety, for protection, for everything. And the worst part was that she'd started to believe it was love. At the same moment, Vincent and Angelo were discovering Marco's play. They'd set up their trap perfectly. Snipers on the rooftops. Armed men positioned at every entrance to the warehouse. They were prepared to take down the Castellano family in a coordinated strike that would have eliminated half their leadership in a single night. But the Castellanos never came. Instead, they found Emma's phone, abandoned on a bench near the warehouse. And they realized, with a sickness that no amount of firepower could cure, that they'd been played. Okay. Stop. We just hit the darkest hour, and I need you to understand what just happened. Marco wasn't trying to kidnap Emma, he was testing her. He was offering her an escape route that Vincent and Angelo didn't know about. James is in the city. Vincent and Angelo both knew and kept it from her. This shatters Emma's trust in both of them because it proves they're doing the exact same controlling behavior that made her leave James in the first place. Emma has left. She's disappeared with Marco's money and his documents. She's run away from both men. The trap failed. Vincent and Angelo's coordinated strike against the Costianos came to nothing because Marco outsmarted them. He proved that they are not as intelligent or in control as they think they are. Everyone has lost. Vincent lost Emma. Angelo lost Emma. The Costianos didn't get what they wanted. And Emma is alone with a suitcase full of money and a new identity. Comment right now. Did you see this coming? Did you think Marco would be the voice of reason? And more importantly, do you think Emma will actually leave, or do you think she'll come back? Subscribe if you haven't already, because the next part, Part 7, The Turning Point, is where one of these men is going to do something absolutely shocking to try to win her back. And it's going to change everything. Vincent Steele sat alone in his penthouse, watching the sun rise over a city that suddenly felt foreign to him. He'd spent the entire night making calls, pulling strings, using every resource at his disposal to find Emma. But Marco had been thorough. The documents were perfect. The money trail was clean. It was as if Emma had simply evaporated from the world. And the worst part was that he understood why. Around 3 in the morning, Vincent had done something he hadn't done in 20 years. He'd looked at himself honestly. Really honestly. Not the version of himself that he showed to the world, the powerful crime boss who'd built an empire through will and intelligence. But the actual version. The frightened kid whose parents had burned to death. The man who'd spent 2 decades trying to control every variable in his life because the one time he hadn't controlled something, everything had been taken from him. And he'd realized that Marco was right. Vincent didn't love Emma. Or rather, he did love her, but his love was a cage. His love was designed to keep her safe by keeping her small, keeping her dependent, keeping her under his control. He told himself he was protecting her. But what he was actually doing was recreating the dynamic that had made her flee from James. He was a different kind of abuser, a gentler one, a more sophisticated one, but an abuser nonetheless. At 6 in the morning, Vincent made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Holloway, his lieutenant. "I want you to find James," he said. "The man who abused Emma. I want to know exactly where he is, and I want you to bring him to me." "Boss." Holloway sounded confused. "I thought you wanted to keep an eye on him." "I did," Vincent said. "But I'm changing strategy. Find him. Bring him here. And then I'm going to do something I should have done the moment I found out he was in the city." Angelo Rossi had spent the night in a different kind of hell. He'd gone to Emma's apartment and found it empty. Her things were still there, her clothes, her books, her photographs, but Emma herself was gone. And he knew, with the kind of certainty that comes from understanding yourself too well, that she'd left because of him. Because of both of them, really. But he couldn't control Vincent's actions. He could only control his own. Angelo stood in Emma's small, worn apartment, surrounded by the evidence of a life lived carefully, and he made a phone call. "I want you to shut down 3 of our major operations," he said to Delacroix. "The ones in the residential neighborhoods. The ones that we know are hurting families." "Boss, that's going to cost us millions," Delacroix protested. "I don't care," Angelo said. "We're done with that part of the business. We're moving to exclusively white-collar operations. Gambling, political corruption, financial crimes. Nothing that directly harms working families." "This is because of the girl," Delacroix said. "Yes," Angelo admitted. "It is. Because the girl showed me that there's a different way to build an empire. And I want to try it. I want to actually become someone worthy of her love, instead of just telling her I'm trying to change." He hung up the phone and sat on Emma's worn couch, and he wept, something he hadn't done since he was 15 years old, crying over his sister's body. Emma was in a hotel room in Miami, lying on a bed that cost more than her monthly rent back in the city, and she was miserable. She had the escape that she'd thought she wanted. She had a new identity, new documents, a new life waiting for her in Costa Rica or anywhere else she wanted to go. She had freedom. She had safety. And she was utterly, completely alone. The television was playing some mindless game show, but she wasn't watching it. She was thinking about Vincent's face when she'd asked him to let her make her own choices. She was thinking about Angelo's sadness when she'd accused him of manipulation. She was thinking about 2 men who loved her imperfectly, who'd made terrible choices, but who were at least trying. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Emma. It's Jasmine from the diner. I don't know how you got this number, but I'm texting you because something happened. Something you need to know about. Please call me. Emma's stomach dropped. She dialed the number immediately. Oh, thank God, Jasmine answered on the first ring. Listen, I don't know the details, but there's a guy in the city. He came to the diner looking for you. He's your ex, right? James. Emma's entire body went cold. What happened? Vincent Steele's people grabbed him, Jasmine said. Right outside the diner. They threw him in a car and drove away. And Emma, I know I don't know Vincent that well, but I know enough to know that when a man like that takes someone, it usually doesn't end well. Vincent was waiting for James in a soundproofed room in the basement of his warehouse. James was strapped to a chair, bleeding slightly from a cut on his forehead where Holloway had been a bit too enthusiastic during the pickup. He looked exactly the same as he had 5 years ago, the same handsome features, the same easy charm, the same emptiness in his eyes that suggested there was nothing of actual substance behind the facade. Hello, James, Vincent said, pulling up a chair and sitting directly in front of him. We need to talk about Emma. James tried to smile, trying to summon that charm that had worked on Emma for so long. Look, I don't know what she told you, but... Vincent hit him. Not hard enough to cause serious injury, just hard enough to make the point that charm wasn't going to work. I'm going to tell you something, Vincent said quietly. And I'm going to tell you this only once. Emma is under my protection. If you ever look at her again, if you ever try to contact her, if you ever even think about her in a way that suggests you have designs on her, I will destroy you. And I will do it slowly enough that you'll have time to regret every moment you spent with her. You can't keep her locked up forever, James said, spitting blood. She's going to leave you eventually. They always do. Vincent leaned in close. You're right, he said. She probably will. But here's the difference between me and you. When she leaves, I'm going to let her go. I'm going to wish her well, and I'm going to accept that I'm not worthy of her love. You, on the other hand, would have spent the rest of her life trying to convince her that she was crazy for leaving, that she owed you another chance, that she was responsible for your happiness. He stood up. You're leaving the city tonight. And you're never coming back. Because if you do, I won't kill you. That would be too quick. Instead, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life knowing that you could have been better, and you chose not to be. Vincent turned to Holloway. Make sure he's on a flight out of here in the next 6 hours. And make sure he knows that we'll be watching to see if he ever gets close to this city again. Then he walked away, leaving James strapped to a chair in a basement he would never be able to escape from, and he did something that James would never understand. He let him go. Not physically, Holloway would handle the logistics, but emotionally. Vincent released the rage that he'd been carrying toward the man who'd hurt Emma. Because he'd realized something. The rage wasn't about James. The rage was about himself. The rage was about Vincent's inability to control the world, to prevent pain, to protect everyone he cared about. And the only way to move forward was to accept that he couldn't control anything. He could only love, and hope, and let go. Emma got a second text message an hour later, this one from an unknown number that somehow felt familiar. James is being deported. He'll be on a flight to Seattle in 4 hours, and he'll never be able to get within 1,000 miles of you without my organization knowing about it. You're safe from him. And more than that, you're free from him. Because I'm releasing him into the world without the expectation that you owe me anything in return. This isn't about winning you back. This is about doing what should have been done the moment I found out he existed. V. Emma read the message 3 times. Then she called the number. Vincent answered on the first ring. Emma. You let him go, she said. I did, Vincent confirmed. Why? What are you getting out of it? Nothing, Vincent said, and there was something different in his voice now. Something that sounded like actual vulnerability instead of controlled power. I'm not getting anything out of it. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Because you deserve to have your past handled by you, not by me. Because I've spent the last 6 hours realizing that everything I've done to try to win you has actually been about winning control of you, and that's not love. That's just another form of what James did to you. Emma felt tears starting to form. I left because you were both making decisions about my life without including me. You were both treating me like I was fragile, like I couldn't handle my own reality. I know, Vincent said. And you were right. You are not fragile. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. And I was diminishing you by trying to protect you. I won't do that anymore. How can I believe that? Emma asked. How can I believe that you're actually going to change, that you're actually going to treat me as an autonomous person? You can't, Vincent said simply. You can only decide whether you trust me enough to come back and find out. And I won't blame you if you don't. I won't hunt you down. I won't send men to find you. I won't try to force your hand. If you want to stay gone, you can stay gone, and I'll accept that as the consequence of my actions. Emma wanted to believe him. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting to believe something and actually being safe were two different things. I need to think about it, she said. Take all the time you need, Vincent replied. I'll be here. But Emma? I mean it. I will wait for you as long as it takes. And if you never come back, I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for the time I had with you, and trying to be a better man because of it. He hung up. An hour later, Emma received a third text message, this one from Angelo. I'm shutting down operations that hurt families. I'm restructuring my entire organization. Not because I expect it to win you back, I don't deserve that. But because you showed me that there's a different way to live, and I want to actually become that person instead of just pretending. And Emma? If you come back, I promise you, no more decisions made for you. No more protection that comes without your consent. Only choices that belong to you alone. Emma read this message and called Angelo immediately. You're shutting down operations, she asked when he picked up. 3 major ones, Angelo confirmed. The ones that were directly harming working families. It's going to cost me millions, but it's the right thing to do. Why are you telling me this? Emma asked. Why are you both trying to convince me that you've changed? Because we have changed, Angelo said. Or at least, we're trying to. And we're not trying because we expect it to win you back. We're trying because you showed us what it actually looks like to be a good person. You showed us that you can survive trauma and still choose kindness. That you can be vulnerable without being weak. That you can move through the world with integrity even when the world is cruel to you. Emma was crying now, silent tears running down her face. I don't know if I can trust either of you, she said. I know, Angelo replied. And that's fair. All I'm asking is that you come back to the city. That you meet with us, both of us together. And that you listen to what we have to say. And then you make your own choice about what happens next. Emma arrived back in the city on a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after she'd fled. She'd spent 6 days in Miami thinking, processing, trying to understand whether Vincent and Angelo's promises of change were genuine or just another form of manipulation designed to pull her back into their orbit. And she'd come to a conclusion. She didn't know. She couldn't know, not without seeing them, without testing them, without putting herself back in the situation and observing how they actually behaved when she wasn't running away. So she came back. She didn't go to Vincent's penthouse. She didn't go to Angelo's offices. Instead, she went to the one place where she'd always felt safe, Malone's diner. It was mid-morning, that quiet period between breakfast and lunch. Jasmine was working, and her face lit up the moment she saw Emma walk in. Oh my God, Jasmine said, coming around the counter to hug her. I was so worried. Are you okay? Did you? I'm okay, Emma said. I just needed some space. But I'm back now, and I need to work. I need to feel normal again. Do you want to work today? Jasmine asked. Because I can call Tony, get you on the schedule. Not today, Emma said. But maybe tomorrow. For now, I just need a cup of coffee and a booth. She sat in her favorite booth by the window, the one with a perfect view of the street, and she waited. She texted neither Vincent nor Angelo to tell them she was back. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Men like them had information networks that were far superior to any official surveillance system. They would know she was back within hours. She was right. Vincent arrived first, around 2 in the afternoon. He entered the diner carefully, as if he was afraid that any sudden movement might startle her. He was dressed simply, dark jeans, a button-down shirt, nothing that suggested power or wealth. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he hadn't been sleeping well. Hi, he said, standing at the edge of her booth but not sitting down. Hi, Emma replied. Can I sit? She gestured to the seat across from her, and he sat, carefully, like he was approaching something fragile. I didn't know if you'd come back, Vincent said. Neither did I, Emma admitted. I'm still not sure if I'm making the right decision. That's fair, Vincent said. I wouldn't expect you to be sure. I wouldn't expect you to trust me. All I can do is tell you the truth about what I've done and what I'm trying to do, and hope that over time, my actions prove that I mean it. Tell me, Emma said. So Vincent told her. He told her about the night he'd spent in his penthouse, looking at himself honestly for the first time in 20 years. He told her about James, about how he'd released him without expectation of gratitude or obligation. He told her about the conversations he'd had with his organization about changing their operating procedures. No more operations that directly harmed vulnerable populations. I'm still a crime boss, Vincent said. I'm still going to do things that aren't legal, things that aren't moral by most people's standards. But I'm trying to do them in a way that doesn't destroy innocent lives. And I'm doing it because you showed me that there was a better way. And what about your need to control everything? Emma asked. What about your need to protect me? Has that magically disappeared? No, Vincent admitted. I still have that need. But I'm learning to recognize it for what it is, a trauma response, not love. And I'm learning to sit with the discomfort of not controlling every variable. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, harder than building an empire, harder than facing my parents' death. But I'm doing it. Before Emma could respond, Angelo walked through the diner door. He moved with less confidence than Vincent, like he was genuinely uncertain of his welcome. He saw Vincent sitting at Emma's booth and paused, clearly debating whether to approach or to leave. Sit, Emma said, gesturing to the seat next to Vincent. Angelo sat, and suddenly the three of them were in a triangle, Emma on one side of the booth, Vincent and Angelo squeezed onto the other side, separated by a gulf of complicated emotions and unfinished business. I've been thinking about something, Emma said, addressing both men. I've been thinking about the fact that you both love me. And I've been trying to understand if that love is real or if it's something you've invented in your minds to justify actions that have nothing to do with me at all. Neither man interrupted. I think, Emma continued, that the love is real. But the love has been mixed up with your own need for redemption, your own desire to be better than you are. And I've been carrying the weight of that redemption for both of you. I've been the symbol of your salvation instead of just being a person. You're right, Vincent said. Completely right, Angelo agreed. And I'm not going to do that anymore, Emma said. I'm not going to be responsible for your redemption. I'm not going to be the prize that you both compete for. I'm not going to let either of you make decisions about my safety, my life, or my future without my explicit consent. Understood, Vincent said. What we're asking, Angelo said carefully, is whether you're willing to have a relationship with us, not with the versions of us that you've imagined, but with the actual men we are. Flawed, complicated, dangerous men who are trying to be better but who will probably fail sometimes. Emma looked at both of them. And for the first time, she saw them clearly. Not as heroes or villains, not as saviors or threats. Just as men. Broken men who were genuinely trying. I need to tell you something, Emma said. Something that I learned while I was gone. Something that changes everything. Both men leaned forward slightly. I hired a private investigator, Emma said. To look into James. To understand how he found me, what he wanted, how deep his obsession went. And the investigator found something interesting. She pulled out a folder, the same kind of folder that Marco had shown her, the kind that seemed to contain the secrets that ruled the underworld. James works for the Castellano family, Emma said. He's been working for them for the past 3 years. And his assignment was to find me, to get close to me, to use me as leverage against both of you. Vincent and Angelo exchanged a look. When Marco warned you about the kidnapping, Emma continued, he wasn't just trying to help you or test your love. He was trying to prevent a much larger operation. James was going to reappear in my life, act like he wanted to reconcile, gain my trust, and then disappear again, but this time, I would go with him. And then the Castellanos would have had me. Jesus, Angelo breathed. Marco stopped it, Emma said. But not because he cared about me. He stopped it because he realized that James was incompetent. That James would inevitably botch the job. So Marco decided to offer me a way out, not to save me, but to prevent the operation from failing spectacularly. She closed the folder. Which means that every decision you both made about protecting me from James, every choice you made without asking me, was based on information that you were actively hiding from me. And that brings us back to the central problem. The central problem being that we treated you like you couldn't handle your own reality, Vincent said quietly. Yes, Emma confirmed. The central problem being that you both, in your own ways, infantilized me. You treated me like I was something to be protected instead of someone to be trusted. She took a deep breath. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work at this diner. I'm going to live my life. And I'm going to see both of you, but on my terms. If you want to have a relationship with me, you're going to have to prove, through your actions, that you respect my autonomy. That you trust me to make decisions about my own life. That you can love me without needing to control me. For how long? Angelo asked. As long as it takes, Emma said. For months. For years. For as long as it takes for me to genuinely believe that you've changed. And if we fail? Vincent asked. If we slip back into old patterns? Then I'll leave, Emma said simply. And this time, I won't come back. For 3 months, nothing happened. Vincent and Angelo both proved to be men of their word. They didn't send people to follow Emma. They didn't make decisions about her life. They came to the diner, they had coffee with her, they listened to her talk about her day, her thoughts, her fears. And when she asked them to leave her alone, they left her alone. But then, on a Thursday night, everything changed again. Emma was closing up the diner when Holloway walked in. Vincent's lieutenant looked grim. I'm sorry, he said. But you need to come with me. There's been a situation. What kind of situation? Emma asked, immediately on alert. The Costillanos made a move, Holloway said. Against Vincent. Against Angelo. And against you. They've taken hostages. And they are demanding that you come to them, or people will die. Emma's heart stopped. What people? Innocent people, Holloway said. Customers at a restaurant in the financial district. They grabbed them about an hour ago. And they sent a message, either you show up at an address they've provided, or they execute everyone inside. Emma looked at Holloway carefully. Did Vincent and Angelo send you to get me? Are they waiting outside to protect me? No, Holloway said. They sent me to give you the message and the choice. Vincent specifically said that if you decided not to go, he would respect that decision. And if you decided to go, he would give you support but he wouldn't control the situation. Emma grabbed her jacket. Let's go. The address was an old apartment building in the industrial district. Armed men were positioned outside, clearly waiting for her. But as Emma approached the entrance, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Marco. Hello, Miss Emma, he said. We need to talk about what's really going on here. You're holding innocent people hostage, Emma said, fury making her voice shake. No, I'm not, Marco replied calmly. There are no hostages. There is no restaurant. This was a test. A test of what? Emma demanded. A test of whether Vincent and Angelo have actually changed, Marco said. Whether they are actually capable of letting you make your own decisions, even when those decisions put you in danger. He gestured toward the building. If they'd sent people to follow you, if they'd tried to control the situation, if they'd made the decision for you about whether you should come here, then I would have known that they haven't changed at all. That they are still the same men they've always been. But they didn't, Emma said. They let me choose. They did, Marco confirmed. Which tells me something important. It tells me that they might actually be capable of loving you without destroying you. And that means I need to change my approach. What do you want? Emma asked. I want a truce, Marco said. Between the Steele organization, the Rossi organization, and the Castellano family. I want an agreement that we can coexist without going to war. And I want you to help broker that agreement. Why would I do that? Emma asked. Because you're the only person that all three of us trust, Marco said. You've shown that you won't be manipulated, that you won't be controlled, that you'll call out bullshit when you see it. You're the neutral ground in a war that's about to get very ugly if we don't find a way to negotiate. Emma considered this. I'll do it, she said finally. But on one condition. What condition? Marco asked. That you leave Vincent and Angelo alone from this moment forward, Emma said. No more tests. No more manipulations. No more playing games with their lives or mine. If you want a truce, it has to be genuine. Marco smiled, and for the first time, it looked like the smile of a man who'd been waiting for someone to show him strength. Agreed, he said. 3 months later, Emma stood in a private dining room at Escalates, the same restaurant where Vincent had first revealed his true self to her, and watched two men who'd spent the last decade as mortal enemies shake hands. Vincent Steele and Angelo Rossi had never been friends. They would probably never be friends. The rivalry that had defined their relationship for years ran too deep, the competition for territory and power too fundamental to their organizations. But they had agreed, at Emma's insistence, to coexist peacefully. And more than that, they had both agreed to respect each other's relationship with her. So, Marco said, raising a glass of wine. To new beginnings. To the understanding that sometimes the most profitable decision is the one that costs you the least blood. The three men, Vincent, Angelo, and Marco, clinked glasses. It was a peace unlike any that existed in the underworld. It was fragile. It was held together by shared respect for a woman who refused to be anyone's possession. Emma watched from across the room, speaking quietly with Marco's daughter, a woman named Alessandra who'd become an unlikely friend. Alessandra had been raised in the Castellano organization, groomed to take over the family business, and she understood in a way that few people could what it meant to be trapped between duty and desire. You know what I find fascinating? Alessandra said to Emma. 3 months ago, those men were planning to destroy each other. Now they are at a peace dinner because of you. Not because of me, Emma corrected. Because they finally understood what matters. I was just the catalyst. Maybe, Alessandra said. But I think you're underestimating your power. You didn't change them through force or manipulation. You changed them by being exactly who you are. By refusing to bend, by demanding better, by showing them what integrity actually looks like. Emma watched Vincent across the room. He was engaged in conversation with Angelo about the new territorial agreements, about the neighborhoods that would be off-limits to both organizations, about the way forward that didn't involve bodies. He caught her eye and smiled, a small, genuine smile that wasn't designed to impress or seduce, just a simple acknowledgement of her presence. That smile had become the baseline of her relationship with Vincent. Not grand gestures. Not dramatic declarations of love. Just small moments of genuine connection, carefully maintained by his commitment to respecting her autonomy. Angelo was different. Angelo's approach was more introspective. He'd spent the last 3 months genuinely restructuring his organization, shutting down operations that harmed families, moving toward legitimate business ventures that generated massive income with none of the blood. He'd also started therapy, something that had surprised Emma, but that she'd come to respect deeply. He was doing the hard work of understanding his own psychology, of recognizing his trauma responses, of trying to become someone different from the man he'd been. What are you going to do? Alessandra asked. About both of them? You can't exactly sustain a relationship with two men long-term. Eventually, you're going to have to choose. I'm not going to choose, Emma said. Or rather, I'm choosing something different than what you're implying. What do you mean? I mean that I'm choosing to have relationships with both of them, but not in the way they originally imagined, Emma explained. Vincent and I are figuring it out. We're dating, in a traditional sense. We have dinners, we spend time together, we're exploring what romantic love looks like between us. But I've also maintained a deep connection with Angelo. We meet regularly, we talk about his growth, his fears, his dreams. It's not romantic in the traditional sense, but it's intimate. It's real. That's very modern of you, Alessandra said with a slight smile. It's very honest of me, Emma corrected. Which is the only way I know how to be anymore. Later that night, after the dinner had concluded and Marco had returned to his hotel and Alessandra had gone back to her life, Vincent drove Emma back to her apartment. She'd moved to a new place, a small house in a neighborhood that wasn't controlled by any of the crime families. It was modest, unpretentious, exactly what she wanted. Vincent had offered to buy her something bigger, something more impressive. She declined. I've been thinking about something, Vincent said as they sat on her porch, looking out at the quiet street. About what comes next for us. What do you mean? Emma asked. I mean that I'm in love with you, Vincent said simply. Not as a way to control you or to make myself feel better about my past. But as an actual person who loves another actual person. And I'm wondering if you think there's a future for us. A real future. Emma considered the question carefully. She'd learned not to rush into answers, not to let her emotions override her judgment. I think there's a possibility of a future, she said finally. But I need certain things. Name them, Vincent said. I need you to keep going to therapy, Emma said. Like Angelo is doing. I need you to keep working on understanding why you need to control things. I need you to be honest with me about your struggles, not just your successes. Okay, Vincent agreed. I need you to accept that I will never be someone who requires saving, Emma continued. I need you to understand that I'm capable of making my own decisions, and even if I make bad ones, those are my decisions to make. I understand, Vincent said. And I need you to know that my relationship with Angelo will continue, Emma said. It's not romantic in the traditional sense, but it's important to me. And if you can't accept that, then this doesn't work. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. I won't lie to you, he said finally. It's difficult for me to accept. My instinct is to see Angelo as a rival, to feel jealous, to want to claim you exclusively. But I'm learning that my instinct isn't always correct. And I'm choosing, every day, to trust you to define what our relationship looks like. That's all I can ask, Emma said. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the night deepen. 2 days later, Emma met with Angelo at a small cafe near the university district. Neutral territory, as always. Angelo looked better than he had in months. He was healthier, lighter somehow, like the weight of violence had been lifted from his shoulders. I'm dating Vincent, Emma said without preamble. I wanted you to hear it from me directly, not through the organization's gossip network. I know, Angelo said. And I'm happy for you. I'm happy for both of you. That's very mature, Emma said with a slight smile. I'm in therapy, Angelo replied. I'm learning that love doesn't have to be possessive to be real. I'm learning that I can care about you deeply without needing to own you. It's revolutionary for someone like me. He reached across the table and took her hand. I want you to know something, though. If Vincent ever hurts you, if he ever goes back to trying to control you, I will be there. Not as a rival, but as someone who loves you enough to protect you from anyone, even himself. I know, Emma said. And I appreciate that. But I also need you to know that I can protect myself. That I don't need you to save me. I'm learning that too, Angelo said. It's harder than you'd think, letting go of that need to be the hero. They talked for hours, about his therapy, about the changes he was making in his organization, about the way forward. By the time Emma left, she felt like she'd reached some kind of equilibrium, a place where she could love both men without requiring either of them to be something they weren't. 6 months later, Emma had returned to work at Malone's diner. Not because she needed the money, she'd never spent the cash that Marco had given her, and both Vincent and Angelo had offered her financial support, which she declined. But because the diner was where she felt grounded. It was where she could be herself, serving coffee and omelets to people who had no idea who she was or what she'd survived. Tony, her manager, had welcomed her back without question. Jasmine had cried happy tears. The regular customers had been delighted to see her again. And life had become, in the strangest way, normal. Vincent came by in the mornings, when she had the early shift. He'd sit in his booth, drink his black coffee, and sometimes they'd talk, but often they'd just sit in companionable silence. He was learning, slowly, what it meant to be present without needing to control or dominate. Angelo came by in the afternoons, when Jasmine was working and Emma had a break. They'd sit outside, on the bench in front of the diner, and talk about his therapy, her fears, their dreams. It was a different kind of love, neither romantic nor familial, but something uniquely theirs. The peace between the three families held. Marco had, true to his word, stopped his games. The Costillanos had retreated to their traditional territory. Vincent and Angelo had established new boundaries that both organizations respected. It wasn't perfect. Crime families didn't suddenly become moral organizations because of a truce, but it was sustainable. It was a path forward that didn't require constant warfare. One evening, about a year after Emma had first fled the city, she found herself sitting in Vincent's penthouse. He'd decorated it differently. It was warmer now, less austere. There were photographs on the walls, plants in the corners, evidence of an actual life being lived rather than just a power center. "I've been offered a job," Emma said. "A real job, not at the diner. It's with a non-profit that works with domestic violence survivors. They want me to help design their programs, run their support groups. It pays well, but more importantly, it feels like it matters." "That's incredible," Vincent said. "You should do it." "I wanted to make sure you wouldn't see it as a threat," Emma said. "I know how you are about me being independent, about you needing to protect me." "I'm working on that," Vincent said. "And yes, every part of my brain that's been damaged by my past wants to find a way to control this situation, to make sure you're safe, to ensure you don't get hurt. But I'm learning to sit with that impulse without acting on it. I'm learning that your safety isn't my responsibility. Your safety is yours." He reached out and took her hand. "I love you, Emma. And because I love you, I want you to do the thing that makes you feel alive. I want you to help other people. I want you to build a life that's meaningful to you." "I love you too," Emma said. "Both versions of you, the version that still struggles with his demons, and the version that's learning to be better." "Okay. We did it. We went from a woman serving coffee in a diner, to being caught between two rival mafia bosses, to nearly losing everything, to emerging as the most powerful person in a three-way truce between crime families. But the real victory isn't about power. It's about Emma becoming someone who refused to be controlled, no matter what either man offered or threatened. She insisted on her autonomous set boundaries, she demanded honesty, transparency, and respect in all her relationships. Grew through trauma. She didn't let James's abuse define her. She didn't let Vincent's control consume her. She didn't let Angelo's guilt become her responsibility. Built something real, not a fairy tale romance, but an actual, complicated, beautiful relationship based on mutual respect. And Vincent and Angelo? They learned that love isn't about possession. That redemption is hard work, not a destination. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let go. Comment right now. Did you get the ending you wanted? Do you think Emma made the right choices? And which man do you think was ultimately better for her? Or do you think she made the right call by refusing to choose? Thank you for going on this journey with me. If you loved this story, please subscribe to the channel. More stories like this are coming, and you won't want to miss them. And honestly, your comments and subscriptions mean everything. They tell me that these stories matter to you, that the characters we've created together are real to you. Drop a comment. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear a story about real love, real growth, and real redemption.